YouTube now, and it's also a 6-part, soon to be 7-part investigative series for the BBC and BBC podcasts. But you're not here for me, just thought I'd introduce myself. Before we begin, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Belle Ribeiro Addy, MP, for clapping. She's also the chair of the all-party parliamentary group for African Reparations, which explores how the UK might engage with the legacies of the transatlantic slave trade. Through her work in Parliament, she has helped to bring these discussions into the public and political arena. I also want to offer warm congratulations to Sir Lenny Henry and Marcus Ryder on the publication of their important and timely book. And in addition to this, I would love to also extend these heartfelt thanks to Diane Abbott for being here to speak with us today, and also Paulette Hamilton to my father. Sir Lenny Henry, beyond his incredible career in entertainment, has also been a tireless campaigner for racial equity in the arts, co-founding the Sir Lenny Henry Centre for Media Diversity at Birmingham City University, which works to improve representation across the media industry. And Marcus Ryder, to my left, his co-author and longtime collaborator, is an award-winning journalist and academic. He's also the CEO of the Film and TV charity and chair of the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Marcus has also spent years advocating for racial justice in the media. So tonight we're going to have a discussion, a debate, for about 20 minutes with my own questions leading, and then we'll open the floor to your questions. It'll be putting questions primarily about what reparations might look like and why this book was written by both. And we want to hear from you primarily. This is a discussion for you, not for me to ask my questions. But as I said, I'll open and ask to my right, Belle, why did you feel like this conversation should happen today and in Parliament in particular?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, as you mentioned, I chair the all-party parliamentary group on reparations, and I think one of the most important things that we've been trying to do is ensure that it's no longer considered a fringe issue. Now, I have to be absolutely clear that the campaign for reparations goes years and years beyond the APPG's existence, my mere existence, and even mentioning it in the House of Commons goes beyond me as well. It started with the late great Bernie Grant, who first mentioned reparations in the House of Commons and demanded it for those who formerly enslaved, the descendants of the formerly enslaved and colonised. But it's an important thing to see when somebody, two individuals of fantastic note, Sir Lenny Henry and Marcus Ryder, actually go out and write a book about it. I think it's very important because we see that more and more discussions are being held, and I want to give everybody the opportunity to engage with the book and ask further questions, because that is ultimately what it's about. If we are going to achieve reparations, one of the first things we're going to have to do is seek to educate not just our communities but the wider country, because we need the will of the wider country to be able to drive Parliament to make the changes that it needs to do. And I think discussions like this, as I said, we may not always agree on everything, and those of you who attended our conference a couple of weeks ago may have noticed that, but the most important thing is we are having the discussion. So when someone takes the bold step to write a book, I absolutely think we should have a discussion around it, and I'm really, really pleased that they have, and I hope you've all had a chance to read it.
Can I just pick up on something that Belle said with regards to mainstreaming the idea? So people have asked myself and Lenny about that we've been doing media diversity for years, and we've talked about media diversity, and this feels like a slight departure. At the same time, I think it's a continuation, because this is a really good example of what happens when there is a lack of media diversity. In that when there's a lack of media diversity, issues which are completely mainstream and part of the Overton window throughout the whole of Africa, for this year is the year of reparations for the African Union, for the whole of the Caribbean, with regards to it is policy of CARICOM, right? That is a mainstream absolute middle of the road, right in the dead centre of the Overton window, right? And yet, when you lack media diversity, when you lack people from the Caribbean and from Africa actually having editorial control of our media, and all due respect to the BBC, right, I was there 25 years, and however long you survive, and you're surviving, I would say, as a black person, right? So however long you survive in there, all credit to you. But this is what happens. Things which are completely mainstream for us are presented as a fringe, weird issue. So for me, this is a complete continuation of the work that me and Lenny have been doing previously with regards to media diversity.
Lenny, I'd love to kind of throw this one to you.
Is it me now?
It is indeed. There's a
I
moment in the book.
believe the children are future. Sorry.
Carry on.
Teach them well.
There's a moment in the book in which you speak about the black country flag
Oh yeah.
and what that meant to you in that moment. And I wondered if you could read us a little part of that and
Yeah, right.
also share your reflections.
Okay. This was. I had to go and open the Black Country Archive in Dudley, and this is what happened. Long story short, on the 23rd of April 2014, 2 years after the Black Country flag officially came into existence, I found myself doing the local celebrity thing by opening the Dudley Archives at the local history centre on Tipton Road. It's not quite the Oscars red carpet, but the local press were there and they wanted to take pictures of me by the swanky entrance. As I posed for the local photographers, I was handed the Black Country flag to hold. Until then, I hadn't really thought about the flag or its design. Now, I don't know why this happened. Maybe it was because I was thinking about the area's history and my place in it, but something just clicked. I looked down at the flag I was holding, and it slowly dawned on me that the chain on the flag didn't just represent those chains built for ships, such as the Titanic. It also represented the shackles made to hold my enslaved ancestors on slave ships. During the ceremony, while noticing the whole change connection, I had an actual out-of-body experience. If you Google Lenny Henry Black Country flag, you'll find a picture of me smiling in front of the Dudley Archives and History Centre, arms outstretched, holding the flag in front of me. Although I looked happy-go-lucky and smiley, inside I was thinking, what am I doing? I'm waving a flag celebrating the Black Country's history of making chains, some of which were utilised in the enslaving of my ancestors. And then my mind really began spinning off. I'm so proud to be born in Dudley and to claim my identity of coming from the Black Country, but is the Black Country proud of me? Does this flag accept my place in the region's rich history? A therapist would describe what I was going through as a disassociation, the mental process of disconnecting from one's thoughts, feelings, memories, or sense of identity as a way of coping with stress and trauma. My body was doing one thing, posing, smiling, cracking jokes. Meanwhile, a vast number of thoughts and feelings were racing through my mind. And could there be a more accurate description of how black people feel about slavery than coping with stress and trauma?
Bringing it back to that moment,
Yeah.
when this happened and the kind of very complicated feelings that you had, what's your reflections today on how you were feeling at the time, and especially given that you've now written the book?
Well, first of all, I wasn't taught about slavery at my school. Anybody else not taught about it. They just ignored it. So I left school and Norman Beaton made me read a lot of books. Mate, you need to read books. And he had a whole library of black history books on his shelves and he showed them to me. Banner! He made me read them. And I learned about Clive of India and the transatlantic slave trade, and it was then, when I was doing the Fosters in London. And it really made me think, there should have been something available when I was at school, because this is too late for me to be learning about this. Our kids need to be learning about this from when they're little. I know it's brutal, but we need to know this stuff. We need to be armed with this. So I kind of knew a bit about Dudley and the chains. I put a joke about it in Three Little Birds, about the Titanic, the chain being made in Brierley Hill, and it would weigh 15 tons, and Hosanna says, maybe that's why it sink. And I just thought, yeah, so I knew about the chains, but I still hadn't made the connection. And then it all became very clear when I saw the flag. So now I feel that we've written something that any kid can go to a library and get it out and do their research. They can find out about slavery, they can find out about reparations, and they can read the play at the end. And they can know about feelings, about intent, and they can understand about where they are in the scheme of things. Because growing up in this country for a very long time, I didn't know where I stood in the scheme of things, till I saw Roots, obviously, and then everything changed.
Speaking about education and the conversation around reparations contemporarily in the UK, there was a moment in the book that you also mentioned a tweet.
Oh, can I read that? Do you mind?
Please,
This
yeah.
was great. Well, it wasn't great, but this was. I got it. Okay, so this was the tweet, right, where we all learned something really important. I don't know if you were there. I don't know if you had a reaction to this, but it's probably one of the triggers for the book. I found out about all this but through possibly one of the most bizarre and insensitive tweets in history. And that's really saying something when you think about all the weird, crazy things posted on social media. The tweet was posted by the official account of HM Treasury at HM Treasury on Friday the 9th of February 2019. It read, "Here's today's #Friday fact. Millions of you helped end the slave trade through your taxes." And it was accompanied by an illustration of enslaved black people, bound and shackled, walking through a tropical climate with the caption, "In 1833, Britain used £20 million, 40% of its national budget, to buy freedom for all slaves in the empire. The amount of money borrowed for the Slavery Abolition Act was so large that it wasn't paid off until 2015, which means that living British citizens helped pay to end the slave trade."
Immediate
Yeah.
reflections on that, Marcus, because I think hearing that and thinking of the fact that you spent a long time in your career thinking about practical change, when you hear narratives like that, what does that make you think of in terms of what's necessary?
Well, I'd actually direct that question to the MPs, because I would be curious, because the MPs are the ones who decide our taxes. And so knowing that I was paying tax to actually pay my former slave masters, right, feels kind of abhorrent, right? And so I'd be really curious with the people who actually have the power over our taxes, how they felt when they read that tweet and why they're in Parliament. So I'd really love to throw that to Diane and to Belle.
Well, firstly, I thought, how stupid whose idea was to tweet that? That was the thing that first came to my mind. And actually, I remember me and Diane, I went into Diane's office and I was like, look at what someone has tweeted, because they were so proud. They were so proud, and just the insensitive way to think that no one, and particularly us who had been paying taxes, we who are the descendants of those who were enslaved, that we might not think, what the hell? And you know, they took that tweet down. Obviously, people had screenshot it and it was reproduced again and again, but there was such a huge uproar that they took it down. But if there's anything that was important about that, it helped spark a very important conversation. And it helped bring something to the fore that we would have never have known. And you know, Marcus, you're talking about how obviously we make decisions on taxes. None of us here made a decision on that. We had no idea that was happening. But then it started to open up a few other discussions. So yeah, that was my reaction to it. My first reaction was, Diane, you see this? So we can ask Diane.
When I saw it, I was completely shocked. And one of the shocking things about it is that the Bank of England person that tweeted it out, he just took racism and slavery for granted. It didn't occur to him to say, why am I tweeting this? What does this mean? And I think it's a continuing struggle to get the wider society to take racism and to take the history of slavery, take it seriously. But yeah, it shows you in a way how far we have to go. Oh, sorry, darling.
I think they've said it all. For me, Belle is still at the stage where she says, I'm so hungry. I just shake my head. I don't know if it's my age. I just think, here we go again. and I get a bit heavy-hearted because it's a fight that we've been fighting. I'm over that magic age, and it seems to keep happening, and people are not learning. But you know what? I serve a living God. I believe that one day it will change, but we just have to keep fighting for it.
It's a really good example of the power of journalism, because that tweet only came out because, and the person unfortunately is anonymous, put in a freedom of information request to the Treasury to actually ask them when it was paid off, right? And so the Treasury didn't know that that was coming, right? And so it's because they had to answer that freedom of information request, and then somebody must have, in the Treasury, must have seen the freedom of information request, and as Belle said, was incredibly stupid and thought, well, this is a moment of pride, right? But it was, it shows that when people, and I really have to stress this because quite often when we talk about reparations, when we talk about the struggle against racism, it can be debilitating. It can feel so large and so difficult, and so that we just think there's nothing we can do.
We've all got PTSD.
We do, right? We're all suffering from trauma, and so this is a really small example, or a brilliant example of how a small act of just putting in a freedom of information request, which we all can do, right? I say it's a journalism, so because it's normally journalists that use it, but it doesn't have to be. It might be a member of the public. We don't know who put in the freedom of information request, and that
I wouldn't even know how to do that anyway.
it says it in the book, but that's okay.
I'm talking about putting that.
Yeah, no. So you write to government bodies, or you write to different institutions. You know, and you just and you can Google how do you put in a freedom of information request rather than me gabbling on. But yeah, it really does show how you can actually make a difference.
Can I also say that the sheer loudness of the sucking of teeth when people read that could be heard on the moon. Just literally unbelievable. The other thing that's in the book is the description of how it was presented, which I think is really awful. The idea of slaves, black people enslaving each other and threatening to kill each other with no buildings around, like it was just an uncivilized. It was so upsetting the way it was presented.
Yeah, so
Like it was our fault.
So if it's not clear, the picture which accompanied the tweet was a picture of black people leading other black people. There was no white people in the actual picture depicting slavery. So, you know, it says it all really.
It was targeted racism, I think.
Just to note,
Don't
there's
trip
a
over
vote happening, so some of our MPs may leave us momentarily.
What about reparations? I go for it, yes.
Marcus, thinking about the role of the media, one of the main fixations around this book in mainstream media has been this number, right? So the big payback, £18 trillion. How did you reach that figure? And also, perhaps something that's quite basic for many people in the room, but how would you even define reparations, reparative justice?
So,
When you say how did we reach that number, what do you mean? That's what vexed me about the word Lenny having £18.6 trillion. When I read that in the back, I nearly drowned. I didn't come up with the number. The Bradley report came up with the number, right? And it's hugely eminent professors who worked out what the reparations would be. Am I right about that?
yeah.
Hugely eminent. And they worked it out of, you know, when you work for 400 years for free, and your people are sexually and physically abused, and your kids are taken away from you, and you're ripped out of the country of your birth and moved somewhere else to work, and they work it out. What would that add up to in the end?
Yeah, and I don't think it's by chance. So first of all, when the Brattle report came out in 2023, I think it is, yeah, it was picked up by the BBC. It was picked up by the Guardian, right? But not much else, because there was, even though it was an incredibly important report, it was the first report that really had such academic backing and rigour behind it, that came up with the 18 million, but it was just reported in a few places.
18 trillion.
Right, 18 trillion, sorry. Right? What's interesting is that when this book comes out, the 18 trillion is a few pages in one chapter, right? And yet, it is then presented by the Daily Mail, the Express, the Telegraph, the Times, basically everybody, apart from the Guardian. I'm going to give the Guardian its due, right? Saying that, not mentioning the Brattle report in the headline, but saying Lenny Henry basically wants your 18 trillion. Like somehow, white people pay Lenny 18 trillion. That's basically how it was framed.
It hasn't happened
Right.
yet. Not even a poem.
And so reparations is distilled down to a single figure, right? When really it's about repair and restorative justice. Reparations is then presented as a celebrity being greedy
Or flippant.
and flippant of somehow wanting 18 trillion. Now, if you read all of the newspapers that I just mentioned, they mention the Brattle report, but they mention it halfway down or 2/3 of the way down, and the vast majority of people aren't reading the actual long piece. They're looking at the headline that Lenny Henry wants your 18 trillion, right? And so the press coverage that we've got, you know, and the online coverage that we've got has been vile towards Lenny, right?
I've never had that before, by the way. Even when I dressed up as Tina Turner, it wasn't as bad. But it's a real shock to go from Lenny and Comic Relief Posse raised nearly 2 billion for charities at home and abroad to go to He's Filth for asking for 18.6 trillion when I didn't even ask for that. And also in the book we do talk about that figure, and we also keep talking about how it probably won't be about money. It'll be about social engineering. It'll be about reaching out. It'll be about debt cancellation. It'll be about a lot of things, but it won't be about all of us meeting in a car park and getting 30 grand each in Reddy's. It's not going to be that. But the book is about the possibility of, well, how, not only that, but how could it be? What reparations could be? Because reparation is about repair, not just about cash in hand.
And I'm sure Diane can talk about negative press more than anybody. But I'd just be curious as to if we've had this over just a few weeks of the book, just how the response has been as an MP talking about reparations.
I remember when I was a new MP, I'd only been in Parliament a few years, that Bernie Grant, who some of you will remember, he was the first member of Parliament to raise reparations in Parliament. And a little while after that, I held a meeting in Parliament about reparations. But I think we have to give all credit to Belle, who's worked really hard to put this issue in the spotlight when it wasn't necessarily easy to do. And just what I would say briefly, in terms, somebody said, how did we work out the figure? Remember, slaves were property. It's property. And it was valued at the time. And all you have to do is turn it into modern money. And the other thing to say, because as you heard, in 38 years in Parliament, I've had a fair bit of abuse in the media. But what I would say, I know it's difficult, no one knows more than me that it's difficult to open a newspaper and see all this, what can I tell you, fuckers, right? It's bringing the issue into the mainstream, which is so important. And even if they're abusing you, at least they're taking it seriously, enough to abuse you. It's not a marginal issue as it has been. So it's hard to take all that abuse and misrepresentation of what you're saying, but in a funny way, it's a step forward.
Thank Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Just one more question from me before we open the floor. And I hope it's okay to reference something you said earlier about whether or not there's kind of been a backslide in the attitudes and things like this. So you think about George Floyd in 2020, and you think about the nature of the conversation and all the promises that came in around that time. I mean, where are we now? When you think about the reaction to the book so far and some of the conversation that has happened online, where do you think we are now? And
So, in the book, we talk about the difference between reparations and restitution, right? And so, restitution, and we credit. So, first of all, going back to the Guardian, when they covered the book, the headline was "It's more than just money," right? So they actively pushed against what they saw was coming, right? But what I'd also credit the Guardian for, and we talk about it in the book, is that they don't label what the money that they're giving due to slavery and their links to cotton and whatever as reparations. They talk about restorative justice and talk about restitution, because reparation is about proper repair, and if we have proper repair, then we're talking about power dynamics, right? And if you give me X amount of money, but the power dynamic is that you are still my boss, right? That's not proper repair. That's not putting us back to where we were. And so for me, the issue with regards to George Floyd and a lot of the stuff which was said during Black Lives Matter was that, for me, it was framed as charity, right? It was about how can we give charity to black people? How can we help black people? Wow, they're victims of racism. How can we? But what invariably wasn't part of the debate was how do we change the power dynamic so that we don't, so that one, we can fix it ourselves, and two, we don't need charity. And so reparations for us and the backlash that will eventually come is until you give us power, until we have a proper power dynamic, right, we will always be at the behest of white institutions and what have you. I worked in Scotland, so this is a slight diversion, so apologies. Right, so I worked in Scotland for 8 years. And Scotland, this is going to sound a bit mad, but Scotland taught me a lot about power dynamics. So when New Labour came in, right, New Labour had over-indexed on Scottish representation in cabinet. Right? So it would be the same as having a packed full of cabinet of black people. But what they so Tony Blair, he might deny it, but he's basically Scottish. Right? He went to school in Scotland, he was born in Scotland, he's Scottish. Right? Gordon Brown, Scottish, Alistair Darling, Scottish. Right? They're packed full of Scottish. They recognised that it wasn't about representation simply at Westminster. What they recognised is they had to change the power dynamic, and so they devolved power to the Scottish government, because you're changing power dynamics, not just about representation. The debate following, and all the policies and stuff following George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, was not actually changing institutions and power dynamics. They were just about changing representation at best, and or giving us a bit of charity. Right? This book, and what I think they're frightened of, is that we're talking about changing power dynamics and structures. That's what's at the heart of the CARICOM 10-point plan. It's not about 18 trillion, it's about changing power dynamics and structures. And I think people say there's a real backlash. I think the backlash is that we have got to the point where we have reached the limit of recognising that the next part is actually changing power structures and power dynamics.
It's the beginning of a conversation, right?
Yeah, and that's what I think people are frightened of.
Yeah, yeah. I think we should talk about Scottish some more. I thought it was a good digression.
I feel like a child talking to Diane Abbott about New Labour and
Remember days, remember New Labour days now? It's like last century. It's like Jurassic times.
we have about 20 minutes